Well, hello everyone, and this one is all about stimulants. So I'm going through what for me is one of the most strange and peculiar times of my life, and I've had lots, so that is saying something. So what's been going on is I've made a conscious choice to let go of the last stimulants which I've been habituated to, which I've had very strong habits about. And I'm a fairly unusual person, as much as most of the things that people take as stimulants I don't take. So I haven't for a long time done coffee or tea, and refined sugar is not something my system can cope with at all. So I'm really familiar with not having any of these stimulants in my life. However, there still have been some which I've been having on a regular basis, and these particularly include the tobacco and also the cacao. And I would not have considered cacao as a stimulant, the raw cacao, but it's just so incredibly obvious as it is, and I'm so clear about this because of not having these things anymore. So the whole story about stimulants is fascinating, historically speaking. And there was a very big thing that happened to Western Europe, which was when tea and coffee were brought from the countries where they were consumed indigenously, and it literally changed the whole of the course of history of the Western world. And the same thing goes for refined sugar as well. So if you go back to medieval period, the only form of sweetener that should have been available to people would have been honey, and that would have been something that would have been very much reserved for the richer people. The average person would have had very little chance to consume such things. When tea and coffee and refined sugar hit the Western world, it produced an explosion in terms of activity, intelligence, and also the urge for conquest. Really tied in very, very strongly with the introduction of stimulants. And indeed, particularly in the UK, there were the first tea and coffee houses. When they were created, there were places where all the brightest minds would gather and share information, and the age of enlightenment revolutions were actually spurred by the consumption of stimulating plants. So I'm very aware of all that in the light of what I'm about to say. So what I've woken up to is the fact that I live in a society where everyone I know is completely habituated to taking a really wide range of stimulating substances, and these are having far more of a strong effect upon us all than we might realise. And the way it's become home to me that this is the case is because of how I've been feeling since I stopped taking them, and also what led me to make this choice in the first place. So what I want to do now is talk to you about a friend of mine. Now, this friend was making use of something called amphetamine sulfate, and he'd been habituated for this for 15 years or more, and I could see how it was affecting him. And when I was in my very early 20s, I experimented with taking all sorts of different things to find out what they were like. And I had 3 experiences with amphetamine, only 3, because each time we did exactly the same thing. So what all stimulants do is they give us a short-term gain, and that increases intelligence, ability to process information. We become very lively, animated, we might be more physically active. So you get some really great benefits from stimulants, there's no doubt about it. And here's the paradox. So anyone who's ever had anything as strong as amphetamine will know that what happens is you get the consequence, which is called the come down, and that usually kicks in the following day. And when you get the come down, you feel absolutely awful, your intelligence goes way down, you find it very hard to get anything done, and you're very likely to feel depressed and lacking motivation and feeling just really horrible. So this is the pattern with stimulants, and there's a really easy way to avoid it with something like amphetamine. All you do is you get up the next day and you have some more, and then the following day you have some more, and you keep doing that. And of course, if that's what you do, what will happen to you over a long period of time is that your body gets more and more depleted. You lose essential minerals and other nutrients to your body, and you end up feeling progressively worse over time until you start to have really obvious symptoms such as damage to the liver, and that causes the skin to go yellow and the person gets premature aging. There's no doubt about it. Anyone who takes amphetamine, crystal meth, cocaine, any of these powerful substances, they get a really serious long-term loss which is obvious to witness. Now, my journey is that I remember a particular time when I occupied the arts block of the university which I was studying at the time, because myself and many of us were concerned that one of the students, he'd been found in possession of cannabis. In those days that was quite a serious crime, and he was taken to court and he had a punishment, some kind of a heavy fine, some other action was taken against him in that way. And then when he'd done all that, the university decided they would throw him out of the country. And at that particular point, that meant he would be conscripted in his native land and have to go and fight in a foreign war, which he didn't want to do. So many of our students were very much against that. So I, along with lots of other students, we occupied the arts block of the university, and that was my first proper taste of coffee. So I just drank coffee as often as I wanted for 3 days, and after that I just felt so absolutely ghastly that produced in me a complete revulsion against it, and I wasn't able to have it for very many years. So I tended to have an attitude of keeping away from stimulants, or so I thought, but it seems to be such a strong impulse in human beings that I was actually conning myself. So really my story in recent years is that I have been habituated to a whole bunch of things which I didn't consider to be stimulants but actually are. And the most obvious one is tobacco. So I've been working with tobacco and with plant medicines and with cacao, and those have been the main stimulants I've been having. And then there are other things I've been having which I never considered as stimulants at all, such as onions and garlic. In fact, I'm a great lover of onions and garlic, and I love all the plant medicines. I love the tobacco, but what I've done, and it's like an experiment, which is I've just cut all these things out from my life, and I've done so quite drastically. And what the result has been is that I have been knocked for six to such an extent I've been unable to function pretty much, and I've had to spend time accepting I've not been able to get anything done, and it's not been possible to make much in the way of films or do much in the way of anything, quite frankly. And I've just reached the point in this process where it's possible to make a film, start making films again and communicate with you. So what I'm realizing is, since I let go of all these stimulants, which includes the plant medicines and the tobacco and the cacao and the onions and the garlic, and come to think of it, things like chili and cayenne I would include as well, I'm not having those either. By leaving all these things out of my life, what's happened is I simply went into what I call the mother of all come downs. And in fact, although it's not the same as taking amphetamine, I feel the way it's affected me has been similar to the friend that I knew who actually stopped taking his amphetamine. He went through a really rough time. So I'm going through a really rough time simply from letting go of what I will call natural plant stimulants. And it's an incredible journey I'm on. And so the way it feels to me is it's as if I've been taken into the garage and had a complete service, and my engine's been stripped down and all put back together again. And while that's been the case, I've not been capable of doing anything. And then when the engine's all put back together again and they put the fuel in the vehicle, they turn the engine over and it splutters into life, and then there's something a bit wrong and then it packs in again. Well, that's very much how I have been for the last weeks. So I'm able to function, and then I start doing stuff, and then the functioning goes, and I just have to pack in because I'm not actually there yet. So this is the situation I'm in. So still going through this, but today my energy levels have improved to the point where at least it's been possible to come out for a walk for the first time in quite a long time, and the landscape's really changed. We're into late autumn now, and you can see all the leaves are off the trees. It's very, very different from my last walk out in the wild nature, and it's been hard having to accept I just haven't had the energy to do it. And what's happening for me is I'm getting a whole series of what I call cascade realizations about what life is like now without the stimulants, and what it will eventually be like, but also what the last few years of my life have been like. Now when it comes to, say, the use of tobacco and cacao, which have been my big ones, the tobacco, far less than a lot of smokers have smoked, maybe say between 3 and 6 smokes a day, and pretty small ones at that. Cacao, maybe 1 bulletproof hot chocolate a day, sometimes 2, that's been it. So although the amount I've been having has been very small, that's actually been an indicator to me about how I've been doing. So what's happened simply is this: I have run myself into the ground through the overuse of stimulants. And when I look back, particularly at the last few months of my life, but even the last few years, I can see a slow deterioration in my energy, which is the inevitable result of overdoing stimulants. So in a sense, this is something of a confession, and I'm really aware of the fact I've not been able to work as much as I would have liked to have done, haven't been able to get things together as much as I would want to do. And then there was a really big indicator when I got together in my relationship with my partner, and at first everything was really wonderful for us sexually, but particularly over the last 6 months, my sexual libido has just dropped all the way down to almost 0, and that was one of the final signs that convinced me, dude, you got to do something about this, because I'm with a wonderful partner, a very beautiful person I love very much, and the sexual functioning is really just not happening. So I need to deal with this. So out of all the things, this has been the one that's caused me to feel like, yeah, time to take a big step, which is what I've done. So this big step is about letting go of all the stimulants, going through the mother of all hangovers. Now, I've let go of smoking many, many times in my life, and when I've had this before, what I would normally find is just the very first day of not smoking, that very first evening, I would feel like a kind of a sudden surge of energy, which was quite an attractive reason to stop. But this time, because I let go of all stimulants, I didn't get that. I got the mother of all come-downs instead. So what I realised looking back is that whenever I've let go of any stimulant, what I've always done historically is I will stop taking one stimulant and go on to another one. So stop the tobacco and take up the cacao, stop the cacao, take up something else. This has been my pattern. So, because I've actually let them all go at once, there wasn't anything for me to hang on to in that way, which is why it's been so incredibly rough. And I am having some particular help, and I will go about discussing that in the future film. One of the things I've done, particularly to do with the green medicine and the tobacco, I've made a very simple herbal tincture. I just got a gram of each material, put them together with some alcohol, and gave it a really good shake, and kept on shaking it for a 24-hour period every now and again. And I use that liquid, and I just gave myself 3 drops every time I fancied a smoke. So this is what I did for the first day of not smoking. Whenever I wanted to smoke, I had 3 drops of this tincture of the plants. And my plan was I was going to make use of that tincture and make a series of homeopathic dilutions and take those to ease my way off the plants. And you know, I simply haven't bothered. I found just having that one day of taking that herbal tincture, and I've got it available if I want it, I just don't want it. And I guess this is what's really inspiring for me at the moment, is that although I've been through a kind of a hell in terms of feeling absolutely crap beyond belief, I've had this kind of unbending intent which says just keep going with this and see where it leads. So it is very much an experiment, and I will let you know in a little while, in some days or weeks, just how it's getting on. But my intention is this: to leave all the stimulants out completely for a long enough period to really know what it's like to be completely without them, and then having done that, then on special occasions just experiment and explore, trying this stimulant, that stimulant, see how it goes. But my fundamental aim is to actually live without them and see what happens to my state of consciousness, my capacity, my ability to do shamanic journeying, and my ability to function. Now, this is what I predict is going to happen. My prediction is that my body will go through this period of adjustment of not having stimulants, and when it comes out the other end, what's going to happen is I'll have more energy than I've had for many years. So if you like, this is the carrot. This is what's encouraging me to carry on. So I'm going to see where all this takes me. I have a very strong feeling that it's going to be of enormous benefit in the medium to long term. So there's the thing about stimulants: you get the short-term benefit, which we're all familiar with, and you get the long-term drawback. But my concern is that I live in a society where I don't know anyone who doesn't take stimulants. I don't know anyone at all. I had an experience recently going to a vegan cafe and looking at the drinks menu, and I thought, that's really interesting. Apart from maybe a couple of herb teas, absolutely everything else there is stimulant. So it's really a part of our society, part of our way of life. And as a culture, I feel it's probably one of the things that is responsible for us as a society losing our way. The disconnection from the nature and from the land is obviously a really important factor as well. And it's such a sense of gratitude I have to be able to go out into the nature today. It's nice to reconnect. So I've really enjoyed coming out into nature this morning and speaking with you about stimulants. And I'm definitely not through my mother of all come downs yet, because I could feel the energy dropping quite sharply. So I'm on my way back now, and this is a to be continued one. Thank you very much.